Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Here's the Webster Report with Paul the Gasman Webster.
Hello and welcome to another Webster Report on this, the 27th of October 2024. Today would have marked my mum's 94th birthday. So it's been one of reflection with things that I remember my mum clearly teaching me as I was growing up. Always to ask questions, even though that came back and bit her a little bit because she used to get frustrated because I just always ask questions when she asked me to do something. Why should I do that? Why have I got to do this? Why? And that's put me in good stead for most of my life because, you know, there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know the answer, then you've got to ask the question. The answer is always going to be no if, you can't at least ask those questions. And you know, that's what we need to start off with. I know we mention it every week, but we've got to start asking some real, honest questions about what's going on in the world. Another two footballers have dropped dead, 35 and one in the 20s. They're just dropping. People, this is not normal. Everybody knows it's not normal. The BBC have admitted just this month that there might have been a problem with the jibby jab things because it was causing certain clots. That's now the BBC, but they had to balance that up by saying, well, initially it saved 6 million people's lives. Where'd you get this stuff from? But that is enough to cause just that little bit of cognitive dissonance for somebody who's watching a 3-minute clip before football comes on. You know, this is where we're at now, and it's taking some real traction. Last week, the constitution in Ireland was changed. They signed into the constitution now, into law, that there are multiple genders. This is, laws are now being changed. These are against natural laws. So, again, we're seeing another attack on biblical laws that it doesn't seem to mean anything to anybody because everything's just so desensitized. Again, it's these really hard questions that we've got to start asking ourselves. You know, we've got all the things that are going on, all the distractions. We've got all the P. Diddy stuff. We've got the elections, which is in less than 3 weeks now. Where does it start first? Never mind where does it end, because it's just going to carry on going. You know, we've got the march that went on in London. We don't know anything much going on about it because it was quite peaceful, allegedly. But it's protests again. This is what we'll just keep doing. We just keep playing this game within the system. This Babylon system has never changed. It just manipulates in a different way. We've got many more distractions that are coming up. We've got to start somewhere. Articles that ventilators during the pandemic actually killed people rather than saved them because of what it did to the lungs. We've got to ask these questions. People are getting paid out for damage because of these jabs. But they can only get 120 grand. Why? Because the people who brought the jabs in are not liable. So there's a slash fund set up, and that's just it. Is that enough for what's going on? We need to, again, ask these interesting questions. Alex, how are you doing, pal? Can you shed some common sense onto what's gone on this particular week?
No.
Good night.
I just thought I'd say no, but the thing is, something when you were talking then, something really struck me. It's something that I've been saying for a long time. I don't say it all the time, but it struck me again when you were talking. There's a phrase that we see, and in the social media age, it's very common. You've got so many different platforms, whether it's WhatsApp, now it's TikTok, you had Instagram, you used to have Pinterest, you have Facebook, and social media has been a game changer in many ways. There's that many platforms, there's that many sources of information, and we know that in 2016, the thing that they used against Trump at the beginning was fake news. They set up this narrative, and we've seen really extreme expressions of it. When Jacinda Ardern said, if you want to get your news, you get it from us. That was terrible. That was like, it wasn't even New Zealand. I don't know what it was, like Pakistani or something. I'm so out of touch with doing accents. Yeah. Anyway, I was going to do it in South African then. I was going to, you know what I mean? I don't know what I was doing. But
as long as you weren't having a stroke,
no. I can't really do New Zealand. Australia's a bit easier, but New Zealand it's a bit softer. But she's such a monster with a mouthful of horse teeth.
Well, she was the one who said that if you don't have your test, you'll be put into a camp for 2 weeks. Then if you still don't have your test, you'll stay for another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so on. So you'll stay there until you've been tested.
Yeah. And if you want the truth,
she's just been promoted, hasn't she?
You'll get the truth. You'll get the truth from us. All of the sources of information. Right, so basically I'm elaborating on the point. And there's a big war taking place. And it's ongoing. But we have this phrase, TMI, too much information. Now, in reality, that phrase is so common, talking about common sense, that virtually everybody uncritically believes that there is something called too much information. Now, there is information overload because of the internet. There's a lot to take in. But usually the problem that we face, and this comes back to what you talk about, the bills of exchange and what's going on in the world, it isn't that there's too much information. It's that there's not enough information of the right quality. So what's happening is the information that is the information that people need is been buried beneath an avalanche of stuff. And all that other stuff isn't necessarily false either. This is why all these debates rage about true and false, right and wrong. Because a lot of the time, as we know, from our Christian perspective, the devil comes dressed as an angel of light. So sometimes by bringing a truth, because many things can be true at the same time, they just might apply to different domains. So if you bring a truth in from a particular domain, you can do a sleight of hand by bringing everyone's attention. Hey, look at that truth. And then everyone sees that that's true, but they don't see that it's a decoy or a distraction. That's the problem with too much information. There's too much because we're looking in too many different directions. But that doesn't mean there's too much information. It means there isn't enough information of the right quality.
Yeah.
And that's what you're bringing. And this is the only way we'll cut through the butter with a hot knife, is to get right back. And to be honest with you as well, the final point I just make on that is journalism has a lot to answer for. And what you were saying about the BBC finally drip feeding a few things because it's safe to do it now. They can make it seem as if, well, they are accountable, they have listened, they are reporting the truth, but after the damage is done. So this is the problem. Another example of they can lie for a while, deny everything, then totally change position later on and make out that they're really open to truth, because there's literally such a big world of facts and information that you can wade into and pull on whatever strand you want when it suits. Massive decoy system. So our goal is always, I think, when we're talking about common sense, is to remember high quality information. Less is more. That's what we're looking for.
Well, it's the simplicity, isn't it? If there is too much information, it's like being, if you I learned this to my detriment in my first ever hearing. I thought I'd done this tight bundle, but I put that much information in it. They just stood under what they were stood under, and I hadn't even spoken about it.
Yeah.
So it's to understand the situation that you're in, and what's the simplicity. What is the common sense in this situation? When you're looking at stuff like, again, Alex, the sake of repeating myself, which is not unusual, but to be taught to act in such a way that allows entities, agencies, to treat you in certain ways that are legal. And then when you question it, they can't answer you, because if they answer you truthfully, they'll give everything away. And if they answer you legally and it's, they're wrong, they're also knackered. So we're not even playing cat and mouse game anymore. You're going into their domains with their stuff, saying that they can't do it, and they're just going, and what? What are you going to do? Are you going to tell Ghostbusters because the police don't want to know? It stutters sometimes in me, because you walk in. I've gone into different businesses this week, and there's people who are all talking about this stuff, Alex. And normally you're waiting for that 100th monkey syndrome, aren't you? Once this consciousness starts sparking, people will understand just what it is about this system. We are groomed on the farm to act in certain ways, in certain categories, that allow the people who know what this Babylon system runs like, which has never been any different. You've got the politicians now who said nobody was forced to have any jabs, nobody was forced to wear masks. It was all voluntary, yet people were getting fined. Those same politicians were saying it's law. The BBC, ITV, the mainstream media was saying, you've got to do this, it's law. You've got 6 people in your house having a party. Your neighbours are reporting you to the police. That's where you knew society had changed, mate. It's not just the fact that we're going to be involved in another war that's nothing to do with us, but it is everything to do with us, because we allow all this to go on because we don't know how to act. We don't know how to stop these politicians and say, no, we reject it. We don't know how to do it. We don't know how to organise to do that. So we fall apart when we start to get division. We've seen in the truther movement recently, they're all starting to argue with each other again. Some big people in there, some people who've helped a lot of people, but now they're arguing with each other. And people just end up seeing people arguing like that. They turn away and go elsewhere. And it's just about the information. Some of the comments that I've had recently, they're all brilliant comments talking about how we're having honest questions, trying to give honest answers, but people in general just aren't interested. And until this bite happens, well, how hard is it bite? Does it have to bite, Alex? Because I think it's biting pretty hard on people at the minute.
Yeah, well, I don't think. Well, we said before, people are not going to respond until the wolf's at the door, and that I mean, to be honest with you, those of us who know what's going on, we also struggle to know what to do specifically. It's like, how do you take that energy? Like there was the Ike gig on Wednesday. And a lot of people have criticised Ike. So my friend went to the Ike gig, and they've said, well, he doesn't really provide any solutions. But I think he'd be the first to admit that there is no one size fits all convenient solution. People have got to become empowered. So in some ways it's an unfair criticism of Ike. He can only do a certain degree of awareness raising, and he has a bigger platform than we do. And of course the stakes are high because he could introduce deceptions, even sincerely. So just because you've got a large platform, I saw Jordan Peterson having a debate with what was his name, Dawkins, earlier in the week, and it was rubbish. And Peterson's fallen off his perch, and he wasn't even capable of giving Richard Dawkins a run for his money. I think I'd be pretty happy to have a conversation with Richard Dawkins anytime. Wouldn't bother me at all. And I wouldn't fall into the traps that Peterson was doing. So just because you've got a big following and just because you're smart, many smart people, I think Peterson took the first jab or two until he felt ill. So Many otherwise smart people who are part of the truth movement in some way didn't cotton on to the vaccine. So the world's a big place. There's lots of different positions in it. So it's very, very difficult to get reinforcements and to get people who think exactly the same as you do to join ranks, because the scope for division with this concept of too much information, if people think, well, my version's exactly correct and everybody else's is wrong, and that's not just about religion and faith perspectives, it's about the total understanding we have of reality and what's going on in the world. You know, you try and have if you try and have a conversation about a chemtrail with some people, immediately they think you've got like some exotic disease. So there's a lot of barriers.
Not anymore. People have actually seemingly gone and looked at it since Dubai went underwater, at least.
Somehow
people started to look at it, because people have said to me, you were talking about this 10 years ago, and I'm going, yeah, because I've just read what they wanted to do, what they'd been doing, what patents they'd put there. Why don't you believe these people? These people are telling you, we want you dead, we want to kill you, look how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Believe them when they tell you.
Yeah.
They do have to tell us the truth. That's the amazing thing. They have to tell us the truth. But as you said, there's too much information. If I tell you the truth in between all the word salad and you've missed it, I've told you, mate.
Right. Interestingly, you've just said something there that we could build on, right? Because you said something that I agree with. And I've heard a lot of people say that, right, who don't have even a spiritual affiliation. There's no logical reason in pure philosophical logic why they have to tell us anything. Most deceivers, they don't want to get found out, they don't reveal the truth. Now, unless you're dealing with open mockery where they're telling you because they're sadistic, but it feels to me why they have to tell you, because I agree, is because there's a condition placed upon their lies. But who's placing the condition upon their lies? Well, I can't see how it's a human entity that's placing the condition on their lies, because why would they have to tell you anything? Unless the whole point about free will kicks in, right? Well, that's why I said, well, we didn't coerce anyone, even though they did.
It's the law.
Technically, they're correct. And there's a spiritual principle behind it that reflects and honors human free will. But who's enforcing that? Who's saying you can't violate free will?
Well, it's a law, isn't it? They always seem to follow it. It's like
yeah, but where does that law come from?
It's got to come from the creator. It's got to come from
authority.
What's the authority behind the law? Because we've got to. Other than that, morality is going to be subjective. It's somebody likes to kill people and somebody doesn't. But if the majority like that you can kill people, then that becomes the norm. Everybody can love to do that. It doesn't mean that you necessarily know the good and the bad. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good. It opens it up to nothing if there isn't that moralistic thing, because especially if you're coming from, a cell that's just evolved from sludge into this, it just doesn't make sense when you break it down. You can't even have without taking all the scientific stuff away and all the big words, when you look at, the fundamental issue of what the evolution is, it smacks in the face of everything that makes common sense. When you can see a creator in it, that makes sense to me. As a child, I understood the Trinity, and I see people getting bogged down with this Trinity thing in the Bible, because the Trinity, as in a word, isn't in the Bible. But the Godhead concept, the three in one, is taught all the way through. So when I'm still Paul, for whatever that means, right? But I'm a mind, I'm a body, and I'm a spirit. But I'm still one. But those three still belong to me. So if I'm made in his image, why can't he be this? Why wouldn't he be the same? Why wouldn't the Father, the Son, and the Spirit be the same as me, as the mind, the body, and the soul? It just makes sense. It was something I never questioned well before, 40 odd years ago, before I even knew God. But it does bring up this stuff now for me, Alex. When you see the Bible and all the prophecies that have been fulfilled that line up with all the historical and archaeological stuff, you've got to then start be honest and ask questions that, well, have I read the Bible? No. Have I done any studies? No. I went to the church once on a Sunday, and then I went for 3 weeks because I was getting married and I got church for 3 weeks. All that stuff doesn't give you any of that information. And without going to that information with your open mind, I think you'd be missing something, because if I said to you about the bills of exchange and you went, what's that? And I say, oh, well, it'll show you this, but as a creditor, you should set off. And you go, oh, that's a load of rubbish. Have you read this? No. Well, you're missing something. So for me, when I'd not read the Bible, I thought, well, I'll have to read this, because it's the only conspiracy that I've never read, but people have all these opinions on it. And I went, well, how can I have an honest opinion if I haven't read it? Because when I'm looking to my left, all I can see that all the institutions going back as far as our history have led us, and we have to reanalyze all our history, don't we? Because of all the things that we're finding out about, stuff that's been hidden from us. This is real stuff. You've been taught to act a certain way within a certain system, and you don't know what you're doing. You just say that's life. Well, that's why once upon a time we used to give our firstborn for sacrifice. This is what they want back. The Sodom and Gomorrah stuff is basically what this world is now. It doesn't stop at same-sex marriages and just shagging about everywhere and animals and all this. It's about hating each other, about one-upping each other. There's a story in Sodom where a poor man comes, and they all give him all these riches, and they make him rich in Sodom. And he goes and tries to buy stuff, and nobody will sell anything to him. So he's got all these riches, he can't buy any food. And then when he dies, they go and get all the stuff back. It was just entertainment, because that was normal in society. Well, how far are we away from that when we're taking people out of hospitals and putting them in old folks' homes and watching them die through plate glass windows? How far are we going when we're saying that all that's okay? We've lost a fundamental foundation of morals, or should I say they're certainly crumbling anyway.
But I'd say for me, one of the things that struck me when you were talking again there was that the problem that we're dealing with, all of us in this construct, operates on two levels. So I just give you an example of why that is, because it's not immediately apparent to most people why it is. So we should look at the logic. I used to work in mental health and vocational rehabilitation, and many a time I'd work with clients who had either never worked or hadn't worked for a long time, and they'd had a lot of challenges at work a lot of the time with authoritarian managers, bullying managers, narcissistic managers, unsympathetic managers, bullying colleagues. They'd had certain setbacks, and they'd been in a mental health ghetto for a time that they couldn't get out of. So they'd come to our organisation, and I profile them from the beginning, like what's your background, what's your history, what's your experience, what are your skills, what are your interests. I'd work through this program, and then we'd set something up for them. But as a big part of that process, I used to sit down with people and say, okay, tell me a bit about your week. And we'd have this piece of A4, and we'd have it as a landscape, and we'd take it from Monday to Friday, and then we'd have the weekend here. AM and PM. Put your structures in. And you could even do morning, afternoon, and evening. And so we all knew those people who, when they'd had kids and the kids were a bit younger, they'd take them to Cubs or Rainbows, and then they get older and it'd be Scouts or Guides, Brownies, whatever it had been before that. And you see people developing these structures, and everyone's got them, and it's a bit like a treadmill. So they go to work, they do the 9 to 5, do the shift system. They have plans for the weekend when they're officially free. They plan their holidays. They'll go to church on Sunday, You know, they'll have these evening events. And at that level, once people have got that structure in place, they quite like it. So the hamster in its cage with its treadmill really likes its treadmill for a bit of exercise. So that is defining for a lot of people. And it becomes something that provides them with containment. And it means that every minute of every day, they don't have to think creatively about, well, what should I do now? What should I do now not to be bored and do something constructive and meaningful? And you could even say, what's there to do now so that I don't notice time passing and I don't get depressed? So those things in themselves, a lot of people, when they achieve that and they develop something that they call a full life, and they think that's the best I could achieve, and there's no corruption in it, they go, oh, well, that was going very well until the government did this and stopped me doing that. So we need our old normal back. And then the government says, no, it's a new normal now. You're going to have to adjust to a new normal. And everyone goes, no, I want the old normal back. But what is the old normal? It's a treadmill. Before COVID, before all the issues of truth in the Babylonian system, those human beings were interested, right, and focused on just being left alone and living their life in peace. Well, where's God in that? So in a way, is it not a blessing that something's come along and shown us, well, is the point of life and was the point of life ever that? How many people have you heard complaining about work? I start work at 16, they're increasing the retirement age all the time. It's now 67, they're looking at pushing it to 70. So people make the best of it, but they're not really happy about it. So they're not really content, but they make the best. It's called pragmatism. However, when you get shaken, like all those people who went on furlough, hey, this is all right, I'm getting 80% of my salary, I can stay at home, brilliant, until they got bored. So it's always coming out of some frying pan and going into another fire. But they're not asking more fundamental questions about what am I doing every day of my life? Why am I here? How am I going to maximize it? They don't ask those questions because they get into a comfort zone, because somebody teaches them, this is what you do. You get up, you brush your teeth, you do this, you get up, you go to work. That's what everyone does. Work hard, pay your bills. We're back there. It's another example of just broadening out that treadmill of all the things. It's not just work hard, pay your bills. It's conform to the pattern of society that everybody else is. Look left, look right. What's your neighbour doing? Oh, well, I'll get a better car than them or a better house. Right? And so that whole consumerist thing kicks in. But it's a hermetically sealed bubble. Nobody wants to break outside that bubble. They want to stay comfortably in it. And the only reason they complain within the truth movement is because some scumbag came in and disrupted their hamster wheel. It's like, will you leave me alone, please? I want to get back on my hamster wheel. And I'm thinking, we need to ask questions on two levels. Yeah, these Babylonian crooks are doing this. But what is there if they weren't doing that? Would we be happy as a pig in mud? With no God in our life, with no meaning, with no purpose other than very basic things?
I can't honestly say I couldn't even see how we ended up in this position that we're in, because for 35, 40 years of my life, I was there. I was doing all this stuff. It was when, you were talking about it doesn't just come down to working hard and paying bills, but when the fundamental foundations of your life is you've got to get a job and you've got to pay your bills, and your parents who taught you that believe that, and then you find out in the system that I'm actually classed as a creditor, because you speak to anybody, Alex, and say, hey, do you know that you're a creditor? 98% will go, yeah, of course I am. Yeah, no, I'm a creditor. Then why do you pay bills? What do you mean? Everybody pays bills. Well, creditors should set off bills. They shouldn't pay them. Debtors pay them. What? Well, you shouldn't pay them. You should set them off. Well, what do you mean? Everybody pays bills. So that's where we get stuck right there, because that now means all your equity is just being stolen, and you'll accept all the blame all the time. It comes down to what you're basically doing is we were talking about people waiting for a delivery of a parcel. Well, what you've normally paid for that parcel when you've ordered the delivery. Well, what if the driver turns up and says, here's your parcel, make sure you pay me? you would argue all day with him. There's no way you'd be paying him again. And yet you've gone to use your labour, you've been taxed on that labour, and then they send you an invoice for you to pay again. And it's just, how do you, if you can't break through that, then the spiritual thing is beyond that. You've got to break through, at least for me, speaking from my experience, once I broke through this world's barrier and I could see that the bloodlines, because this is what these people believe, we spoke about Charles taking his bloodline all the way back to the tribe of Dan. These people are the epitome of the bloodlines that are fighting over this world. They believe in Satan. They believe in sacrifice rituals. They believe in it. It doesn't matter whether you do. It really doesn't. But these people do, and they know that if they put the truth in front of you and then throw all this other rubbish around it, most people won't sort through the rubbish because it won't affect them. And by the time it does affect them, it's normally always too late, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think when we, for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter what the reason is. You're trying to raise awareness with this specific emphasis, but I think once we've gone into that black hole and we've accepted our hamster wheel status, they can just do little tests like, I wonder if this hamster in this cage, if I tell this hamster it has to wear a mask while it's running around on its wheel, even though the oxygen levels will go down and it might struggle a bit, and the hamster happily puts a mask on, and they're going to go, oh, all is well. We can just bring some more stuff in, and then next thing you know, the government of Ireland can say, yeah, we can go totally contrary to the fact that there's man and woman and always has been. We'll now codify in law that there are many, many genders and that is now legal. And you think, wow, that's incredible. But that is a direct consequence of us having been in our hamster cage, happily on our wheel, following the prescriptions now to wear a mask on our wheel, even if we're in the cage on our own, if we're in the car on our own, so we don't infect ourselves or whatever fancy it is. So it's once you don't question it, the most fundamental level, it's only a matter of time till the oppressors cotton on. Hey, we can do anything here. They haven't got any means of retaliation. They've got no interest in retaliation. We can shut down all the people who are considered to be fake news and dissenting voices. We can now bang them up in prison for 2 years for saying something on social media so we can actually disappear them. So that's why we've got to this place, because earlier on in the piece, like you said many times, if we'd have only done this at this time, there was still a chance of turning the ship round. Now it's looking increasingly like that's going to prove very difficult, because that world construct now is so deranged. There's so much lawlessness. I mean, here I am in Darwin, right? And in the last 3 or 4 weeks, the amount of police, sirens, and it's the youth kicking off all the time. It's almost like you get this idea of almost like a spiritual release. Now, we've talked about this a few times, about the restrainer in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. But I speak to people who are not even Christian, and they won't accept the Christian message, and they'll argue tooth and nail with me that, well, I've just got a different spirituality. But even they can see that lawlessness has just gone to a different level, and they will admit that it's of biblical proportion, even though they're not Christian. So the reality is everyone can see it, and it's magnitudes greater than it was before COVID. It's just gone stratospheric. So, we've still got to try and make an impact on people, but it's a lot harder now, because I think, again, like you said in the High Court, if things had happened, or if at the time when they'd introduced the mask mandates, people had said, get lost.
That's all they would have was no. Yeah, that's all it would have taken was no. That was it. But instead, everybody just complied because, the factor was people who complied would wear a mask under the chin.
Yeah.
And the people who wanted you to wear a mask were happy for them to have it under the chin. So what does it tell you, Alex? It's telling you that it's a control thing. You'll do as you're told. Look, people were like, yeah, they told me I'd wear my mask, but I wore it under my chin, so yeah, I got one over on them. It was madness. It was madness because it was. I suppose it was worse knowing what the agenda was that was coming through behind it for me, because I knew if they were forcing masks, the jabs wouldn't be too far away, even though we never got to that. But I could see it in all the other industries. The NHS and the care homes were terrible for it. Man, I've got family members who had two jabs so they could carry on working because they built up a rapport for these elderly women that she looked after. They weren't just somebody who they just went in and worked with. She sat, she spoke, listened to their day, listened to their past, made them feel like they were still alive, made them feel like they were still wanted by people, because there's a lot of people who are in these homes that the relatives and children live miles away. They've got on with their own lives, but people were doing that not just for the money to pay bills, but they did it for all that and to give these people a chance. I heard care homes about letting people come in who were all masked up and everything, but once they got inside and they got into the room with the relative, they could be normal as long as they came back out dressed like that. Well, again, weren't even mandated, that couldn't be mandated. So we'll bend the rules, and you can't do it. If you comply, it's mandated. This is how they work it through this system. That was why if we hadn't come out of Europe, we would have gone full civil law. We wouldn't even be having this stuff now. They were going to, in Germany, they were going to hold people down under civil legislation, hold them down and jab them. That's battery and rape, that, in our country. So people, we've got to get to a point where, well, I'd like to get to that point where we start asking questions and going in numbers to places and asking real questions and saying, you've got to stop this. We're putting a stop to it without the violence. But how can you get that? Because we can't organise. If anybody starts to organise, that's normally targeted. So we're up against a lot because they're ahead of the game on a lot of this stuff. People come out of left field with some of the stuff that absolutely bamboozled them. We've talked about it many times, that gyro check, really, they didn't know what to do. They knew it was remedy, and I got it told to me in court. So they knew it was remedy, but then they didn't know what to do with it until they just went, you know what, just ignore them. And then nobody can afford the bills, and they want that remedy now. But that's the difficult bit. And it's, how do we work it from here? And that the only way to do it is to start having open and honest conversations about the stuff that would work or should work, and then channeling it and taking it to a court. There are good people in this court system. It's just you're going to have to fight for it. That's the difficult bit. When you've been stood in a courtroom with remedy, and you still can't walk away with the remedy intact, it shows you what we're up against. On top of all the lies you were taught, then they're using armed police. It changed me fundamentally as a man. It made me realise everything was wrong in this world, and it made me feel like there was no hope. Because I knew there was something after this life, but I didn't know what it was. And all of it shone to that one story, which was unique, that all these bastards said is a lie. And that was the only place that I went then. And then those dots matched up with these dots. And then what can you do, Alex? You can only sit in what you know to be the truth until something comes along and changes that. They couldn't do anything with the bills of exchange stuff, and they can't do anything with this because it's true. It just says what it says, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it when I read the Old Testament, New Testament. I couldn't believe it's the same story all through the generations. And it's when you were talking about too much information, I like too much information because I'm I have time to be able to sit through it all. And when I'm interested in it, I'll do it anyway. I'll just sit through it. But I want that information. Some will be good, some will fit, some might not fit yet, some doesn't fit. But if you've not got all those contrasts, and even if you've not got the information, as we've said many a time, we've had lads on this show who've brought their own expertise from their own researches, and it adds or it changes perspective. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to change perspectives of people. But I don't know what it's going to take because everybody knows there's something wrong. There's an article, 80% of the public are like that now with pharmaceutical medicines. And it's taken 3 years of people suddenly dying. And it's, as you said earlier, that everybody's seen this lawlessness. It's been a steady build-up over 20 years, but the last 4, it's gone off everywhere, hasn't it, Alex?
Yeah, and the whole, in this country in particular, particularly Northwest European cultures, including the Germanic, the Dutch and so on, as well as ours, they were always high trust cultures. So migration has just brought in a lot of people who don't operate in a high trust way. And the good thing about a high trust culture is there's a load of assumptions that you can make about how people will treat each other within the social contract. When you get into a situation like when many of these Europeans started coming over from landlocked countries, they just started taking fish out of the rivers that we don't eat, which disrupted the biodiversity. But they weren't bothered because obviously from their culture, they eat fish like that. They just think, hey, look, some free fish here, no one else is eating them, we'll just take them. But what that did, it was just on that simple level, it's very disruptive to ecology because it affects every other species. Suddenly fish that weren't being eaten, suddenly they're all being eaten.
Yeah.
Or not all, but a lot of them. And that just, it's going to have a knock-on effect. That's on a simple level. So when you look at specific behaviours and interpersonal behaviours, we knew about the rapes in Germany and all this stuff and the people that they're bringing in. But it's been done deliberately as part of the culture war to undermine the high trust status of Western culture so that people can't any longer, in the social contract, rely on the values that they used to take for granted. And some things actually we never really appreciate saying or recognise that taking something for granted is a good thing. Nobody says, hey, take this person for granted is always considered bad. But there are certain assumptions, which is taking something for granted, that we should be able to not question. And that's one of them, that high trust should form the basis of a healthy social contract. It was explored by Shakespeare in The Merchant of Venice with Shylock, who just happened to be Jewish. Everyone then calls it anti-Semitic. But that culture was the same. Pound of flesh. And it was all like that sort of level of corruption. And of course, the Jews got tarnished with that one. But anyone from a non-Western, non-Northwestern European culture, probably in the nuts and bolts, didn't have the same sort of high trust culture that we had. And it's been eroded here. So the lawlessness is much greater here. And it's the same in China. The population of China always made more concessions to the imperial dynasties who sought more control over them because the Chinese were paranoid about invaders. So the people didn't have the same freedom ethic that we had, and they allowed the authorities to be more paternalistic and more controlling because both them and the imperial leaders wanted safety from outsiders. So it's been harder for them to break down our values in the West, grounded in freedom and high trust. That's why they had to have a cataclysmic COVID event and bring in loads of migrants to change the constitution of our culture, to break down the traditional bonds between people. And they've been largely successful in the culture war because that's what it is. It's a culture war on a very deep level.
Well, I mean, you're going back to 1929 with the Kalergi plan.
Yeah.
So this isn't something new. And when you look in 2009, where Bill Gates is saying that the next big thing is going to be a pandemic, and then on top of that, all these vaccines, where he actually says in his TED talk that the population of the world's going to rise to possibly 9 billion, but with a good vaccination program and reproductive healthcare, we can lower that. That's genocide. That's what he's actually preaching, eugenics.
Yeah.
Now, if Bill Gates can preach eugenics on a TED talk, but Hitler can't, but he's doing exactly the same thing, but in a philanthropic, I can't even say the word, in another way. I can't see the differences that are coming here. The lines aren't vivid anymore, Alex. That everything's blurred. If in Germany that you can be pinned down in 2021 and injected with something, what's the difference between what Mengele was doing? Where do we go with it?
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
can do that, if you can pin somebody down and do that now, what have we learned? What's the difference from 100 years ago, 80 years ago? What is the difference? I always bang on I had three uncles, two at Dunkirk. I don't know where my other uncle was. They came home from that war, but they fought against what we've got in this country. We've got this migration issue that's coming in. When they become established in this country with all the free stuff, who will they vote for? They'll vote for who has given them all the free stuff, just like what was happening in the States. And
Yeah.
and people can see this. People can see that the laws are being changed for this. And yet we're still going to argue over Tommy Robinson and what's going on and protesting. It doesn't work. So if we keep repeating the same things and expecting a different outcome, I would suggest that's possibly insanity. But as you said, Alex, what do we do? None of us really know. We just know something's got to be done. Somebody commented on one of the channels, on one of the podcasts this week, that they wanted to know when I was going to just work for free for everybody else and set up a website and do all their work and all their court cases for nothing. Why? Why would I do that? I've said all along that I'll sit and talk to people about the information I know and have got, and I've sat, you my witness, I've sat for hours upon hours with people for nothing, because I won't do it for other people, because people need to do it for themselves. That's why we're in this mess, because when you get a monopoly of people who can only do certain things, then we're stuck. And we're in a system where we're taught to go to a solicitor who's within the system of the monopoly. And your monopoly piece, you don't know how to control it. So you give power to all these other agencies to act as you. And the bank being the biggest, 25-year mortgage, they act as you for 25 years. What are they doing in your name as a creditor? You've given them that. We've got to... We don't even know if we can deregister property or do what we can do with it, because we can't all sit together and come up with a real solution. No, my way is better than yours. You lost this, and no, you do. They're too busy arguing, and while we're arguing, they're running off with everything.
Yeah, well, you were saying what's the difference between the sort of the Mengele era and the one now, if they're able to pin people down and vaccinate them against the will. Well, I think the difference is pretty much clear. That they've mobilised health and safety. They always do. And there's enough people, and they know there's enough people, because people have always had, like, do you remember the movie The Thing?
Yeah.
So what that played on as a horror, it was a classic, obviously, was fear of contagion. And this contagion can do unspeakable things and, like, totally take you over, and you can't distinguish, like an invasion of the body snatchers type thing. And it's that primordial fear, and Ike talks a lot about the energetic frequency of fear. That fear will make a lot of people conform. So I think, obviously, they took a lot of the Nazi scientists and incorporated them into NASA and other institutions and became preeminent scientists in this system who've been working on things, because obviously they tried a lot of stuff out in a lot of the camps on people. So they just realised, oh, well, we just developed this tech now, but we'll roll it out. We no longer have to do it under the conditions we did before in concentration camps. We can just claim a health and safety crisis, a global pandemic. That's where when the WHO were allowed, and our government allowed them and didn't, sign up to the treaty, it used to have to be a serious airborne issue like smallpox, but not like a variation of a cold. So the pandemic was not just the number of people affected, it was the severity. And of course, they just totally rewrote that. So because they've been able to do that, they've been able to mobilize anything. Now you have to register your chickens just in case there's bird flu, because that's it now. You can't keep anything. If you want to wage war on eggs, because they're very nutritious, right, well, bird flu, register your chickens. If you don't, you're breaking the law. And it's easy for them now. They've set the precedent, and they'll use anything that's health-based. And the reason that they can do it is there's a percentage of dumb people who will believe anything. And because they're paranoid about health, they're paranoid about the slightest little thing and primitive contagion. And it's great when you've got animals as well. Oh, my God, it's more from the animals. Right. That's a horror story. It's just mobilizing Hollywood story arcs to make people scared of a hybrid that's jumped across from animals to humans. It's so basic, but they can do that because people writ large are dumb.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned contagions, because part of one on my list was these astronauts that have been stuck up in outer space, floating around wherever they are. They've come back and they've rushed one of them to hospital with a mystery illness caught in space. What do you think type of contagion should we expect from this one?
Yeah, space contagion, obviously.
Well, is it Romulus? Is it Prometheus? Is it what? What is it?
Yeah. Well, it'll be the
an alien virus. You just mentioned about the thing.
It'll be the Alpha Centauri variants.
You don't think it'll be like
4.3 light years.
You don't think it'll be like the thing? All of a sudden, NASA's been taken over and we don't even know it yet.
Yeah.
It's been taken over. It's been taken over by reptilians, mate.
Yeah. But, the problem with it is, as we discover, no matter which way we stretch the blanket, it's too short to cover your feet. So whenever
at the moment, Alex, they're cutting the top off the blanket and stitching it onto the bottom to try and cover them feet.
Yeah, exactly.
And people just going, we'll get it right next time. We'll get it right next time.
That's a really good metaphor, actually. Cut the top off, put it on the bottom to cover the feet, but then your head's exposed, and it's the same thing. So
then you put it up over your head, and your feet are exposed. So you cut the top off and stick it on the bottom. Again, this is the voting. This is the voting system. People don't like Keir Starmer, but they've got another 3.5 years of the Labour manifesto yet, unless the government is voided. And how do we do that? How do we dissolve government and start again with real people doing the real job?
Well, you don't, do you?
Nobody knows what the system is anyway. I always said, Alex, there's nothing wrong with the system. It would run all right for us. If we could actually flatten the debt and everything, we'd have done it easily if we'd have all been acting correctly. We'd have been thriving. But we've been kept away from that. And the system's designed to keep us away from that. The education system teaches us what to think and not how to think. There's no critical thinking anymore. When people who can critically think have time and look at this stuff, they can see it. That's why you have this big spike during the pandemic where people went, "What's going on?" They could actually see something. But what it's created is all these mental health issues because when people couldn't leave their house, they can't disguise their issues as much, especially if you're kept in close consorts with people. I knew people who'd been seeing each other for about 3 weeks and they ended up stuck in the same house together. And they found out that they really weren't compatible. They'd only seen each other three weeks. But when you're jammed in a place together, you start to really, oh, I don't like that about him, and this, that. So a lot of that, on top of losing the jobs or being put under pressure with jobs, the mental health issues that have come. Only this week, the East Lancs Road was shut the other day because somebody fell off a bridge. And in the article I've seen today, all they're talking about, Alex, is we've been saying for ages those railings should be higher. They're high enough to not fall off.
Yeah.
So there's obviously an underlying common denominator why there's so many people falling onto train tracks, falling onto motorways, falling off bridges. We've got to have this honest conversation because the mental health services are just they're virtually non-existent. They're on overload, and I know there's good people in that mental health system that want to do things and help people. But when we're talking about this all the time, you're never going to heal people. And, we know that the NHS is not set up to heal people and cure people because it's a business. A patient cured is a customer lost. In the prison service, a prisoner rehabilitated, it's a customer loss. We can't afford
it's interesting what you're saying, though, Paul. Your example about the railings and then the people complaining about the railings being built higher. Now, that's a really good example because this describes this too much information thing that gets misrepresented because there's a problem and the way people attribute the problem is like, well, we need to stop the problem of people killing themselves. They don't address the underlying reason of all the motivations and all the reasons why people are doing it. Because that's the really interesting question. It's like, oh, well, no, if we could actually build the railings much, much higher, nobody'd be able to do that. Yeah, I know, but then they'd jump off a multi-story car park, wouldn't they? So the point is, what we're getting is all these pseudo solutions or innovations or ideas where people saying, yeah, the problem's this, and we need to do this in order to mitigate this. Or, oh, look, I mean, I used to have a cottage in Myvenroyd outside Ebden Bridge, and it used to flood a lot. And in the end, the Environment Agency, with just at the end of the EU tenure, they managed to get a grant which enabled them to put flood defences in place. And I'm not saying they shouldn't put flood defences in place, but it's always like they didn't want to look at the fact that they stopped dredging the rivers because they decided that we don't want to spend that money because we're spending it on other stuff like lining the pockets of our cronies. So all these different rivers, the silt build-up was so great, then the banks were overflowing. So instead of it, because they'd eroded service, everyone goes, let's build some walls around it. Well, no, just spend the money to dredge the river like you used to. When services were about the public, then you wouldn't get you still get flooding, but not to the same degree. So the problem is they identify a problem at the wrong level or one that's not convenient to them. They don't address the problem at source because it's easier to create, to deal with one of the effects further down the road, throw millions at it that doesn't really address the problem. But everyone's a winner because people are making money. Someone's getting a fat contract. We'll shut the people up, but we won't address the real deeper issue. That's what we've got everywhere.
You just reminded me, there was an article that a farmer posted in England, and he said he had a bloody folder, and he said these are records that his dad had kept of the water and all the water, and he said this field, he said there was so many acre covered in water. And he said it's when we used to have a rivers agency that used to look after the waters and dredging and stuff like that, this never happened. But the factor is they want these farms flooded. They want the crops and everything to fail. We pay our farmers to not grow things anyway. So if we now start looking to going back to being self-sufficient, the last thing that they want us to be is self-sufficient. So why would they make sure that our fields didn't flood? Why would they not make? Why did they let our infrastructure completely just fall to bits? It's because this is all part of the same plan, mate. We're stuck between a rock and an hard place, I think.
Yeah, well, it ain't just river dredging. So do you remember they used to have these intermediate care facilities for people? When they came, you saw that all hospital bed thing. Everyone's getting discharged now. They're often getting discharged without meds. I had a case today. A friend of mine, his dad's 87. They discharged him the night before after pneumonia. They discharged him without his meds because the pharmacy didn't have them. So sent him home and went to the hospital earlier today because I had to go and get the meds. Long drive, got the meds, went through a right rigmarole. But when you get on car park, this is at Salford, there's an intermediate care centre that's still open, but the vast majority are closed. And it used to be at one time that when you're off the critical list, that you would move to the intermediate, like a halfway house for some other people before you went back independent. And that way they could put social worker care plans in place. They could make sure you weren't going back to a house. You just come out from some kind of potential medical emergency where everything's sort of really tentative. You need to be looked after properly. There may not be somebody at home. You might not be able to put services in place within a plan, but they just send them home. Now, these intermediate care places, what some bright spark said was, well, I'll tell you what, we can just do that in the community. So we'll close all these things down. So you can imagine what would happen. Somebody high up the food chain thinks, I'll tell you what, we could sell some of that infrastructure off, like they did with the UK gold when Gordon Brown sold it. Make a killing on it. Some backhanders under the table. We'll make a killing. Get some of my cronies in. We'll sell that infrastructure. We'll talk about community initiatives to replace these things. And then about a year down the line, we just won't put the community infrastructure in place. We've lost the physical infrastructure that's been sold. Someone's trousered some of the money. And then that's that. Oh, what's going on here? Let's get a voice call. Right. So, yeah. So that's another example of what's happening. What's all this here? More credits. I like this. More credits just said. Fact is, you are not Alex Brocklehurst, but you do not know our souls were stolen. Right. Well, I might ask for some elaboration. I might ask for some further clarification on that because I'm intrigued to know what the punchline is. Can you put that on the screen there?
Unless he's unless the pertaining to the fact of our souls being sold because well, not actually our souls, but us being sold into this with our parents and the Vatican holding these certificates as if they hold our soul. I don't know if that's the type of thing that they're getting at.
Well, interestingly, if that's true, I don't believe anyone's got the power. I don't believe when you're a Christian, if you really are, see, I believe that the atonement story got distorted for reasons I'm not going to get into because it's really technical and complicated. But I think the more accurate understanding of the cross and what happened was human beings were subject to Stockholm syndrome. They all went, if you think about Eve and her innocence in the garden, she'd been created from the rib of Adam. And there she is minding her own business. And she gets told by Adam, who'd been told by God, you can eat of anything, but you can't eat from this tree. So she's relatively innocent. And then she is befuddled by a serpent that has far more knowledge, insight, awareness than she could have, duped her. So in that sense, it was a no contest. Yeah, she made a choice and she corrupted her husband by leading him into that same disobedience. But the reality is, it was like being captured by a more powerful, the New Testament Gospels talk about the strong man. Someone's got to restrain the strong man. Well, at that time, her chances were very slim. We all ended up going into agreements. We all ended up going into agreements with the hostage taker. And that's the problem that we've got. But I believe that when we're liberated, that power has been taken away. So nobody has control over my soul other than God. And I'm not bothered what anyone says about that. Nobody has control over my soul other than God. Because I gave it back to God by saying, I reject being under the thrall of the adversary.
Yeah, I think that's when it changes. I think I would say in general though, most people are, they talk about the dead, don't they? But they're asleep. That most people are asleep. I know I was. I can look back at myself now, Alex, and see how deep a slumber I was actually in. It's quite eye opening when you see it. Go on.
Just look at this latest comment here. We can't be Christian until we claim the name, Christian name. I'm not buying that. It doesn't
What do
make
you
any
mean?
sense. It doesn't say that in the Bible, does it? It doesn't say the way you become a Christian is by claiming your Christian name or talk about birth certificates. So,
I think
I've got a lot of
we're conflating two different things, aren't we?
Say again.
I think we're conflating two different things: commerce and spirit, soul, spirit.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, exactly. You see, if you're a living being, dedicating your existence to the one that gave you life, then there isn't any system which has you in bondage. If you're redeemed, that's the point. You have to be redeemed. We are in the domain of the strongman because the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers. Simple as that. So we are in that domain. As long as we're in that domain, that's why we needed rescue. And that's not a technical point. That's a very simple point. So you're either rescued and you acknowledge that, or you're in the thrall of the enemy, playing the Stockholm Syndrome game, going into agreement with your captor and playing his game and saying, "Oh, I don't mind. I get fed. I get watered. This is working all right for me. I'm okay. Thank you very much."
doesn't last though. Doesn't last. I mean, for me, it should be as simple as when I go into a shop and I buy something, I've got my little sports car out. I'm entering my Monopoly piece. Mr. Webster's bought a T-shirt, and now Paul's put the shirt on, and commerce is finished. That's how simple it should be. But when the system is set up to work that way, but if you act as a debtor all the time, or on presumption you're a debtor all the time, I should say, that means you have to rebut everything. And like I said, if the system was the opposite, where you didn't have to rebut everything, it was just simple, plain, clear English, and it wasn't corrupt, then it would be a simple system what we've been born into. But when you take God, somebody said in the chat room about the Constitution being based on Christianity, on the laws. Well, when you start to take God out of everything, you've taken God out of the schools, you've taken God out of church, even you've taken God out of society, and then when you take those principles out of society, you create a void. Well, that void will be filled by other principalities, and they are darker ones. And that's when you see all the influence, you see all the devils and the demons who run amok. They all jump to the police service. They all jump to the councils, up into the hierarchies, and then that's it. You've just given up all the system. But if you're grooming kids into that system as well, whereas now 6-year-olds can be talking about puberty blockers, Alex. There's something seriously sick in this society, and it's like when Rome was collapsing. The bread and circuses distract them, give them sports, give them entertainment, and give them some bread while everything's burning. It's let's do something. What should we do?
Yeah, exactly.
Should we throw it open? I know Taylor is going to come on because he's emailed me. Taylor wanted to come on and tell us where everything's up to because he's got 3 weeks left before he comes up with his new election. What's your take on it? Have you seen anything that's going on? I've seen Kamala Harris have some car crash press conferences lately.
Yeah, well, just before we open it up, I would say about this whole thing that I've been recalibrating on a lot of levels. You know, I think we've always got to keep on top of our personal audit. And if you look at the things we can change, we had a discussion a few weeks back now about the difference between awareness and activism. And ideally, we need concerted collective action to turn the ship around with enough people. But for that, we need awareness. But the problem is, in the meantime, while we don't have the level of awareness required to mobilise a large enough number of people to be able to really shift the structures, we can't just sit on our hands, because what happens is you end up, we're just talking about this event that happened, this could happen, Trump might get in, he might win, he might not, Kamala might get in, what might happen? My dad always used to say, if my auntie had have had balls, she'd have been my uncle. So the problem with speculations is they can become quite addictive because everyone becomes like a prophet or a social commentator. And it's like, it's highly specialised. If you look at elections, even some of the more, like Brexit, they didn't think we'd win. They didn't think Trump would get in first time. You know, and there have been many spectacular fails, even with very competent predictors, you know. So what I've been doing is coming back to, you know, myself, because at the end of the day, on an individual level, you've got knowledge in your head. And there's only so much you can do with that knowledge. Like you can influence and impact your surroundings. So what I'm finding is it's empowering to say, I'm constrained in these areas. I can't do much about these things, but I can definitely make an impact in these areas. And that's not always about having a conversation. So recently I've been doing a lot of work that's about comforting people who may be in their final hours or final days. That's really worthwhile. And I think we've got to start looking about to balance the things that we talk about the state of the world by asking questions. Well, how much am I giving in terms of social capital? How much am I giving back? How much am I contributing to this culture? How much am I building up my neighbourhood? Somebody come out to me the other day, right? I was outside, I had my shoes and socks off, and I was earthing because of the electrons. And it's proven in research to reduce inflammation, various things. And some of the neighbours saw me, and it was later on in the evening, there was a bit of rain coming down. One of the neighbours, who has no spiritual affiliation I'm aware of, just came up to me, got down onto her haunches. Maybe she thought I was on the verge of jumping off a bridge myself. But she just asked me how I was. She just asked me how I was. And I had my hoodie up because it was raining. So when they figured out with me, they said, Alex, are you all right? Are you all right? Everyone automatically assumes you're in crisis because you're doing something a bit unusual. But I just waited a bit of time. It was only space. I felt that I could do this thing. But I drew attention. But I was really moved because she just was proactive in checking in and seeing that I was okay. She was very caring. And I thought about it afterwards. I thought, yeah, there was nothing wrong with me. I could have had a conversation saying, yeah, I'm fine. You know, don't worry about it. Could have even been a bit brash and said, what, you assuming that I've got a problem? I could have been arsey. But the bottom line is, a very simple act touched me. And it touched me that much. I'd never thought about praying for her because she's a neighbour I don't see very much. But I prayed a blessing for her because I was moved. A simple act moved me. And to see that I had a much greater connection with this person who lives a couple of houses down from me than many things in the world I can't do much about. So hopefully I've not gone around the houses too much there, but I think there's a balance. So I haven't looked too much at the American election because to me, it's better if Trump gets in. There are too many factors out of our control. They stole the election last time, it's obvious, and they'll try and steal it again. I can't predict whether they'll be successful or not. Obviously, Taylor believes that the White Hats have got it all under control. But ultimately, I don't know. If they have, wonderful. If they haven't and Kamala wins, we've got another 4 years of disaster coming. Worse than under Trump, maybe. Maybe Trump will be worse. I can't think that he would be. But who knows? None of us really know.
Well, Trump wants to strike Iran's nuclear capabilities. So who knows?
Yeah.
You might be lighting the blue touch paper. As you said, these are the things that are out of our control. Stuff like what we were talking about with bills and things like that, even they are out of our control. But there are people that are now challenging these agencies because the bailiffs now know that they're up against it with a lot of people because the people just had enough, Alex. They've decided that they're going to stand the ground and they've got the right paperwork as well. The police are the stumbling block. If the police do the jobs, these bailiffs aren't going in any properties. But the police don't know what their jobs actually are because I think they're influenced from above. The police that are sent, this is what you do, these are our protocols. A mate of mine who was in the police, he's not in the police anymore, but he finished after two warrant applications he went on, and the bailiffs are saying, well, are you not helping us? We normally get help. So the police are helping these people. And I also know coppers that have told people who I know have said, look, I'm not here to help these lot. They were at my brother's last week. Same people were at my brother's last week. I'm not helping these. So you've got people who are on all sides here, but we're all being affected by it. It's where is that line drawn? And, it's as you just said, nobody knows that. Because, I always use an analogy, I think it was back in 86 when Romania collapsed and Ceausescu was swinging from a lamppost. Nobody saw that coming, Alex. It just happened like that. And it doesn't take everybody. It only takes the right fulcrum, and it all comes down. Again, we've got to give that to God now because this is definitely going into biblical agendas. Yeah. When we're looking over to the Middle East now and we're seeing what's going on there, you've got to at least start asking questions. You can't just poo-poo anything off anymore. Once upon a time, you start talking about religion or God or anything, people would roll their eyes. And what else? What alternative have you got? There's no hope in this world the way it's going. There's only one.
Well, as long as we don't, I don't mean to be disrespectful, right? I don't. But as long as we don't hear, that Diddy's been, sorted by the White Hats, Hillary's dead, and Kamala's going to be arrested. Because at the end of the day, there isn't any substance or basis for these statements. There's speculations, and there's no basis. And, if we just keep saying the same thing over and over again, and that's the risk that we all face because we're here, and we're all feeling relatively powerless. And, the gospel is good news. That's what, euangelion in the Greek. It's good news. We all want good news. But the good news, again, it's got to not be fake news. So we've got to know that there's a good chance that, these accounts are true. Otherwise, it's just speculation. I just can't pass off speculation. You've got to say, we don't know. We really don't know. Hopefully, Trump it looks to all intents and purposes better than the system that's in place. He's got to be on that level. But we mustn't make any assumptions about Trump either. I think we need to be cautious and hopefully optimistic if he gets in that it's better, obviously, than Kamala. But you just don't ever know. And no story that we state confidently just because we want to believe it is going to convince me.
Well, I've always said that we can't. We can get information together and we can say, well, it looks like that could happen, but again, we've got to just wait. We've got to wait and see what's going to happen because those type of things are way out of our control. I mean, if it was a real election and it was all done above board, if there was any common sense involved, Kamala Harris wouldn't have anybody voting for her. She can't finish a sentence. She doesn't know what she's talking about. The old fella that was running ahead of her, he can't even run a bath now. So, I mean, Bugs Bunny should have been able to win this election. Never mind Trump. In fact, more people would probably vote for Bugs Bunny. He always missed that left turn at Albuquerque, though. That was his problem. But we've got to be able to talk about all this stuff, but not throw all our eggs into that basket. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, Taylor, he's very passionate about it, and I know he's done the research, but I can't just put it all into a basket like that. Not when I know that they're all fighting for the same thing. It just depends on where this. It's all going to fall down around to Israel. So we've got to look over at what's happening there, and we'll take it from there. Right. So what are the ground rules? He can't just make speculation. He can talk, but he can't make speculation.
No, just that you might rein him in.
You can rein him in.
I'll rein him in then.
He's like Rain Man. Rein him in. See, he's put in the chat room. He's not on a good wicket already. Then why don't you do the research yourself? We do. We just don't put everything into it.
Yeah.
But it's good to have the conversation. I mean, I only mentioned to my mate about what Taylor was talking about, and straight away she went, "That's queuing on stuff." I went, "I know." I said, "He's really researched it, and he believes that that's what's going to be true." And she was just sceptical about it. She went, "Well, you never know, but and she actually thinks that Trump might be the Antichrist. We just don't know these things. It's just one of those things where we've got to, keep talking about it and then see what new information comes out on a daily basis, because we do see things changing on a daily basis. But
yeah.
So our American correspondents, have we got some new news?
Oh man, well, I'm in a good mood from last week's news. So I will say, first of all, the Al Smith dinner, or supposed Al Smith dinner that happened, very interesting, very, very interesting. Trump got his revenge for the was it October 2016, just a few weeks before the election. Remember when he was at that dinner? And it's the dinner where they all roast each other, and where all the actors and all the politicians go there to roast each other and all that, yada yada yada. But Trump was when he was on the mic, he was really hanging in to Hillary, saying, he was talking about, I forget the exact quotes.
Just talking about a few years ago, that isn't it, Taylor?
Huh?
It's a few years ago, that isn't it?
That's 2016. That was I'm referring to 2016. They had a redo just last week or the week before, and so back in 2016, he was laying it into Hillary in front of all these, deep staters and Satanists and etc. Talking about how it takes what it takes to make a village, referencing a book that Hillary made years before that, and saying that Hillary has taken a lot of them, and he's referring to Haiti.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know about the Haiti thing.
Yeah.
What's her face was she was caught smuggling children. She was bailed out by Bill Clinton, who went there personally to exonerate her. And also that lady, I forget her name. She was high up in the Amber Alert system here in America, which is, I'm not sure if you know what that is, but it's the Child Protective Agency. Essentially, it's supposed to be protecting children and reporting lost children. Very that's a very ironic thing right there, isn't it?
Well,
But
what's that bearing got to do with what happened last week? You said you was very happy with something that happened last week.
what goes into a part of it? I'm just giving the backdrop to it. So they basically had a redo of the dinner last week, where he got on the mic and was doing the same thing again, except this time everyone in the audience, and honestly, because of the way that they all look, it makes me even have doubts whether this was just all CGI or Photoshop. Because we only got a few shots from it, and they're all frontal camera shots, just showing the people's reactions. And you see all their faces; they look all depressed and somber. Whereas back in 2016, they were all like, they were laughing at him, and they were basically humiliating him. And Q even made a post on that several years back when he was posting and directly linked to that video. And now he's got to his comeuppance, and I thought that was awesome. You had Chuck Schumer, you had Oprah, you have all these people who were just sitting there with that, just disgusted with that depressed look on their face, like they know that they're done. And that was awesome. Again, it could have been a CGI picture, it could have been CGI, it could have been Photoshop, who knows? But the point is that it's a really nice callback to that event. Tim Waltz was allegedly supposed to be there. He apparently talked on the phone or whatever. It's not important. But another thing, the New York Times did an article talking about how all the tech billionaires are now behind Trump. It's very interesting, isn't it? I call them Silicon Valley, aka Silicon Valley, in California. They've always been known for being far left radicals and almost Marxist communist types. Your Bill Gates, your Zuckerbergs, etc. Why would they all suddenly be coming out and supporting Trump? Well, because multiple reasons. One, Executive Order 13818, which Trump passed in 2018. Where he and the military can seize the assets and the person of individuals who have committed mysterious human rights abuse and child sex trafficking and corruption, which that falls under a lot of these individuals fall into that category. That's how he was able to take out Elon Musk and replace him, take his money and his person, and use his money to buy Twitter. That's how they got Twitter. So it's not that these people are willingly supporting Trump. It's Executive Order 13818. Now, to be fair, there might be a few of them might be like closet conservatives who just couldn't come out and say that what they actually were, because when you're in that world, you can't just come out and say something that goes against the crowd. You'll lose your job and your livelihood. So who knows? But it goes to show that Trump and the White Hats really are in total control. Silicon Valley's been tamed. Hollywood has pretty much been taken down too, because you hardly ever see any more of these famous Hollywood actors and actresses or directors coming out and talking bad about Trump these days. It's amazing. The whole thing, like at this point, if people think that Trump isn't and the White Hats, the military aren't in control, I don't know what to tell you. Go do your research and then come back to me, because it's become so abundantly obvious at this point. It's
Would
incredible.
would it not be absolutely abundantly obvious then, if he wins the election, will we see something manifest?
Well, I don't have the script, so I can't say exactly how it's going to go. But there's really only two possibilities, or three possibilities I can really think of. First, Trump wins outright, which I personally don't see happening because that would be too easy. You have to remember that 2020 was allowed to be stolen, so it wasn't like the Democrats were gaining control. That was that was a snipe operation. But so yeah, Trump. So the first option, Trump gets in there, overtly wins, but then they try to take him down for the court cases that's due in the late November. I forget the exact date. They could try to use the excuse of, oh, we can have him disqualified from the race because of the 14th Amendment, and they could try to use that against him, which would of course allow the Patriots to be able to overtly come out and say, hey, look, it's treason, they're overturning the election. Now here's the second option. The second option is that Kamala, quote unquote, wins, and then they're able to expose her for election fraud, which I personally think will be the case, because they have to be able to redirect this back to 2020, because you can't just have Trump get in there and say, oh, 2020 was fake. No one will believe it. They'll be like, oh man, you're salty as shit, dude. Like, come on. So he has to have that proper context, because people have the attention span of a goldfish. They don't remember. They don't care about things that happened in the past. They has to be linked up to the now. So Kamala, quote unquote, wins, and then the White Hats overturn it, like they could have done in 2020, but didn't, because it was a snipe operation. And then Trump gets in there and because you have to remember that there's a difference between being elected and being inaugurated. They're two different things. And the third option is that there just is no election at all because of a World War III scare, which it looks like we're heading to right now with Ukraine and Russia, and China and Taiwan, and especially Israel and Iran and Lebanon. All fake, but the normies, they all have to be scared into that World War III submission situation.
So Trump said that the US should strike Iran's nuclear capabilities. Is that fake? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, optics. It's
a rumor of war.
Yeah, it's just optics. Just like it's just like when he says that he loves Israel and that he'll do anything for Israel. It's all optics. You have to satisfy the average American voter, and first of all, you have the evangelical class, which is 30 plus million, and most of them are in the Republican Party. So if Trump comes out overtly and says, "Oh, I hate Israel," it's a criminal state, then the whole country will turn against him, because they're all so brainwashed to love the shitty little states. And it's not just evangelicals, it's also just the American public. It's the only democracy in the Middle East, it's our greatest ally, etc., etc. You have to play that game. Go watch The Godfather if you want a good example of what it's like at that level of politics and society. As for but yeah, to answer your question directly, yeah, it's all just optics. However, I will say this: Trump is lessening up on the optics. Last week, he came out and said that Zelensky is the one responsible for the Ukrainian war, not Putin. He couldn't say that several years ago when he was in his first term. The deep state, when it was at full power, would have gone on his ass and would have taken him down for it. But now he can say it. Again, could he have said that back when they were in full control? No, hell no. So that shows that's another piece of evidence that, yeah, they're in control. He literally, and he doesn't even have to talk bad things about Putin anymore. He can literally just come out and say certain things now. The Israel stuff will probably come later, and it's insane. What we knew all along is finally coming out publicly, slowly but surely, and it's amazing. And I'm loving it. I got my figurative popcorn sitting here, just waiting for the big reveal. And also, before I forget to mention this, I'm not too sure if this will happen. This is only a possibility, so don't come at me if it doesn't. On the 30th of this month, which is in like 3 days, there's a possibility that Hillary Clinton might be getting arrested. And I mean overtly arrested. She already got arrested a long time ago, but I'm talking about overtly, the character playing her. Oh, Trump, when he called her beautiful Hillary a few months ago, he's like, we don't call her crooked Hillary anymore. We call her beautiful Hillary. Get it? Because her body's been laid out in a funeral home. Get it? Beautiful. She's dead. It's a calm. It's all comms. Everything that Trump says is a calm. Even his Truth Social posts are all comms. Because Q stopped posting way back in 2020. He came back a little bit for 2022, and then went away again. And now Trump's Truth Social posts have essentially become the new Q. They're all comms, and if you analyze them, you can get a lot out of them. It takes a lot of practice, but once you get into it, you can really learn a lot. This is like literally one of the greatest times to be alive that we're in right now. It's amazing. We're going to see, because very, very soon, once Trump is overtly back in office, because remember, he still is the commander-in-chief. He never left office. And I almost forgot to mention this part. If he's not the commander-in-chief, if he's not the president, then why is it that all of these world leaders from Poland, Hungary, Romania, Japan, China, Russia, etc., why are they all meeting exclusively with Trump, and they're not even going to talk to this character Biden? First of all, Trump couldn't do that if he's not really the commander-in-chief because of the Logan Act. The Logan Act says that he's that a private citizen does not have cannot negotiate with foreign leaders. And if Trump is a private citizen, then he's breaking the law. And you know that if the deep state was at full power, if the Satanists were at full power, if they were really the ones in charge, they would have come out and they would use this as dirt to come out and say, look, Trump is a traitor. He's he's a criminal. We can do him in. But nothing. There's nothing from the quote unquote deep state anymore. If they say anything about it, like in the New York Times, it's just a somber acceptance of it, rather than it actually being some way of trying to alert the public and make them scared about it. Trump is the commander-in-chief, and he has been ever since January 6th. That's what January 6th was all about. To get some...
So, Taylor...
Go ahead.
Can you name any of the white hats?
Well, Trump, first of all, I'll just say about Trump. He's the tip of the spear. He's he's in charge of the face of the operation, but he's not actually the one that's like the only one that's doing it. The white hats are the military, the patriotic military elements that started with the 200 admirals and generals that were kicked out of the military during the Obama years because they knew this was coming. They're not stupid. The deep state knew it was coming. And so Obama, because he was a New World Order puppet, he kicked out all the patriotic admirals and generals, and these same people were surrounding Trump in 2017 on his inauguration day in his Oval Office. It was amazing. Mike Flynn, he's a white hat. He's General Flynn. He's one of the top ones. Amazing, man. And he just had a conference a few days ago where he was actually asked by a person in the audience and asking who's the one playing Biden, and normally when you're a high-ranking general like that, you have to always put on a serious face, right? Especially in public. Well, he couldn't help but giggle for a second and then go back to his serious face. It was amazing. That's his. That was a calm right there, basically saying, yeah, you and I both know the truth. But yeah, that's pretty much the answer. That's pretty much how I can answer your question right there. The 60,000.
Okay, so let's follow the logic. So a while ago, some of these white hats, whoever they were, whether it was Flynn or others, or got together, they arrested certain people. They were busting these paedophile rings. This was like, 7 years ago. So where did they Where did they get the jurisdiction, authority? Which prisons were they in? You know, what detention centres? How do these people, these white hats, have this clout that you would see in regular officials who get named in mainstream media?
Well, to answer your question, where they're kept, Guantanamo Bay Prison. That's why. Don't you remember back during Trump's first term, when he was constantly expanding Guantanamo Bay, putting millions and millions more into expanding it? They even added the Patriot ward for the old people, aka your Jimmy Carters, your George H.W.s, etc. Yeah, that's where these people were taken, and many of them were taken under the auspices of COVID. You know, when people were off the streets and they were all scared and in their homes and all that, they gave them the perfect opportunity to round up a lot of these people. And to answer your question, how they got the authority to do all this, well, there's two prime executive orders that Trump passed during his first couple years in office. Executive order, starting with Executive Order 13848, which allows the president and the military to use the military to take down anyone who is involved with election fraud and trying to interfere with the integrity of American elections, both foreign and domestic. Now, I'm sure you can imagine that covers a lot of people, considering how rigged all the elections have been for decades, including 2016. But and then the big one, Executive Order 13818, which, as I mentioned before, allows Trump and the military to seize the assets and the person of anyone who has been caught committing serious human rights abuse or corruption. And that covers a big ground. So all these child sex traffickers, all these Satanists, all these people involved with the CIA causing foreign wars and all that, all these people, all done. That gives them the authority to take them all down. And if you're wondering how they got the info about these people, well, the military, the white hats, the military has always been split kind of into two separate sides. You had your patriotic elements who have always been keeping their eye on the world scene, keeping an eye on all these Satanists, all these New World Order people. I'll give you an example. Back in World War II, there's this thing called the Dimona intercepts, where they were able to intercept and get information about how Roosevelt was feeding all of the was feeding the head of Poland, as well as the Soviets, information and ammunition and such, and was actually trying to force us into the war. They knew about this all along, but the problem, and there's been so many other cases of this as well, like in Vietnam, in the Gulf War of '91, etc. But the problem has always been that they cannot use this evidence legally because it was obtained without a warrant. In the legal process, if you try to use information obtained without a warrant, it doesn't count, and the case is dismissed, and you can even be put in jail for it. This happens so many times to police officers, for example. So the trick has always been, how do we introduce all of the dirt that we have on the deep staters, on all of these disgusting pedophiles and such? How do we introduce it legally? And the first thing they needed their man in the White House to be able to authorize all this, and that was Donald Trump. They recruited him to be the head of the operation, to give the military this authority. So, for example, who was the one that shut down Epstein's Island, which was a Mossad Israeli operation? That was the Trump administration. I forget Jake Flake, I forget the exact name. On his last day, he shut down Epstein's Island, and thus they were able to get all of the dirt that they had on all the people who visited the island and were involved in the child sex trafficking. It's amazing how that works. All of these raids on Trump, you know, when they invaded Mar-a-Lago, they invaded Trump's house, they invaded Rudy Giuliani, etc. All of those raids were all white hat raids, because the whole point of them was to have an excuse to say, hey, look, we got all this information now. They say that it was on Trump, that was actually on the deep state so they could introduce the evidence legally. That's what all these court cases have all been about. Because now that they have the evidence introduced legally, they can use it in a trial. And have you noticed that there's been so much action in the Southern District of New York in these last few years? For example, the P. Diddy stuff. That's the case because where's the Clinton Foundation? It's Southern District of New York. It's beautiful how all this works. I'm sorry that was a long answer, but go ahead. I hope I answered your question.
No, it's a good answer. I mean, it's still speculative, but it, it's not like it doesn't hang together. So when you do your research, where do you get this information from then?
A mix of sources. First of all, I go to the actual Q boards and I read over the posts, and God, there's thousands of them. So if you ever want to try reading them, you'll be there for a while. But someone I follow, his name is Mike King, at realnewsandhistory.com. He does a very, very, very good job. He's probably he's one of the top guys in the Q community who analyzes this, as well as being a historian. So he's able to link all of these things up to things that happened in the past. And he always brings the receipts. He doesn't ever talk out of his ass and give speculation unless if he ever does, he says that it's just speculation. But the rest of the time, he always brings the receipts. Okay, he always has the proof to be able to back up his claims. And otherwise, I wouldn't be watching him, because I've gone through a lot of people over the years in the quote unquote truth movement, and I've gone, and I've dropped a lot of people because I felt they were not genuine or they were just talking out of their ass. This guy is definitely one of the top guys to watch because he knows his shit, man. And he's been doing this stuff for 30 plus years. And it's not just him as well. There's also people like Derek Johnson, Dave from News Treason, Joe Rambo from the channel's name, Badlands Media. These are all people on BitChute, not BitChute, on Rumble, by the way, because obviously they're not going to be on YouTube. But these, these are all people that you should watch if you really want to understand these things, because they all come out from different perspectives. One guy will be well versed in the mainstream media because he's been reading it for decades. Another guy will actually came from the mainstream media, so he knows what that world's like. Another guy comes from the military, so he knows what all the military agencies are like, and as well as how it works, etc., etc., etc. The Q community actually has some really smart people in it, and I think I've posted some of these links in the chat before. But yeah, I don't claim to know everything, and if I don't know something for certain, I will say that I don't, that I'm speculating, like I just did with the Hillary thing. So there you go. Again, sorry if that was a long-winded answer, but I wanted to make sure I got it out.
Are you any the wiser, Alex?
Say again, Paul.
Are you any the wiser now?
Luke, I think people need to build coherent stories to make sense of facts. There's nothing wrong with speculative theories based on the research that people do. But obviously, your ideas have got to gain traction and currency, and they've got to be testable in a certain way.
What are we going to see? What will we see, Taylor? What will be the thing that pricks our minds to think of what you've just been saying? Do you get me?
Well, first of all, it's not. Well, first of all, there's a lot of people. I want to address this real quick. A lot of people say, "Oh, nothing's happened. Nothing's happened." A lot of things have actually happened. In fact, everything has really changed. I don't see how people can sit there and say that nothing's happened. But as to what's going to happen going forward, again, we're going to get that World War III scare. Whether it will come from Ukraine and Russia, or China and Taiwan, or Israel and Iran and Lebanon, who knows? Or it could even be a combination of the three. You need that big World War III scare to show the normies exactly what the deep state was actually planning to do. But another thing that will happen once Trump officially gets overtly becomes commander in chief again. Well, first of all, things that we're going to see, we're going to see 9/11 truth. I can tell you that for a fact. We're going to see 9/11 truth. Another thing we're going to see is JFK, the Kennedy assassination revealed. Trump already said that he's going to put RFK in charge of a new commission to look into assassination attempts using his phony assassination attempts on himself as a pretext to be able to do that. You know how the deep state would always use false flags in order to be able to introduce a legislation or to start a war or whatever. Well, that's exactly what Trump did with the phony assassination attempts. He used it as an excuse to say, hey, look, the deep state, they tried to kill me. So now I can have Robert Kennedy be in charge of an investigation to look into past assassination attempts. That's right. Another thing, we're going to see and I'm sure you're going to love this one. They're going to completely reform the financial system. So no more debt-based economy. We will no longer have a debt-based economy. We will no longer have a Federal Reserve, or if we do, it'll be completely fundamentally reformed. So it will be an actual banking system and not.
What will it be based on?
Say again.
What will it be based on?
With what's the word I'm looking for? Well, actually based on actual labor and actual tangible things that you can't just print in a printer infinitely to stack up inflation, you know.
Well, what do you mean though? I mean, you'd be talking gold, silver.
It'll probably be a mix of gold and silver and cryptocurrency. Because that's going to be one of the big things that Trump has talked about is crypto as well. And what's it called? I believe Trump said that he's going to be introducing a new he said he was going to be introducing a new organization that'll be handling this, as well as the school system. Yes, we're going to get the education system reformed. We're going to get free college, free university training. So we won't have to go in $1 billion into debt to get a quote unquote higher education. And
how are they going to get rid of the debt-based economy? What are they going to do with all the debt?
Just say fuck it, it's gone. Because remember, the debt is all just fictitious. It's all just imaginary. It's not really there. People just say it's there.
Is it imaginary to the people that are owed money, credit?
Well, what is debt? It's money that you're supposed to owe, right? So at the end of the day, if they just said, "Oh, the debt no longer exists," then you don't owe nothing.
That's great. If we forgive it, we can forgive debt. We used to do it every 7 years. But if we're not going to use a debt-based economy, what is it going to be based on? If it's going to be based on labour, that means we're going to be creditors again.
Yeah, pretty much.
So there's going to be a currency. There's got to be an energy that you exchange. If you're going to go crypto, we're still going to go through the same route as. But if you're saying then Trump is going to get rid of the central banking system, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So if he's going to get rid of the central banking system, he's really fronting all of Europe and the Rothschilds and everything then.
Oh, the Rothschilds have already been taken care of. Oh, have you noticed in these? Let me just bring this up real quick. Have you noticed in the last several years all of these famous people and whether they be politicians, Hollywood stars, media moguls, et cetera, like including the Rothschilds, have been selling off their assets. Whether it be Tom Cruise selling all his old antique cars, you don't do that, by the way, or the Rothschilds selling off their old estates. They're not actually selling anything. That's Executive Order 13818. These people are having their assets seized and their persons seized. All the Rothschilds that have passed away in the last few years. Now, I can't say for certain whether they actually were executed or whether they just died of old age, because, to be fair, they are pretty old. But the point is that Q mentioned the Rothschilds several times and says, "We know you're there. We hear you breathing. No one is safe." And yeah, the Rothschilds, they're done. The all of their assets have been seized. Oh, why else would they? You could say, oh, if one person is doing it, or two or three, it's just a coincidence. But if you have countless, and I mean literally dozens, even hundreds of these famous people just selling off assets, and I mean billions of dollars of assets, it's very, very convenient that it all just so happens to be going on in the last few years. Know what I'm saying? You gotta have that pattern recognition, and that's
it'll be interesting, Taylor, because going from a debt-based economy to another creditors type economy with no gold or assets like that,
well, the gold will probably still. Well, again, like I said, it'll probably be based on gold and silver as well as crypto. They'll give you the option because they're not going to force you all to just go completely digital, because that would just be, a lot of people don't like computers. A lot of people don't use phones.
But that's what they're pushing for over here. They're already putting the facial recognition cameras up. They're already pushing for that over here. As for gold, we haven't got any gold, so we can't start an economy backed by gold, because our corrupt politicians sold what bit of gold we had left. They sold it off at the minimum price. So
yes.
where will you get your gold from?
Yes, but remember, as I just stated, Executive Order 13818.
So you've seized the assets to what you're going to base the economy on. Is that what you're saying then?
Essentially, yeah, seize the assets and distribute it through the economy again. And we're actually already starting to see that as gold has suddenly. Have you noticed that gold and silver have become more and more around recently in the last couple of years?
Yes, we have. Alex, does this sound like 1930s Germany to you?
Which bit?
All of it. Executive orders seizing assets from bankers and then arresting them. Sounds pretty familiar to me, mate.
Exactly. And Hitler wasn't the only one that did that. Mussolini did it. Franco did it. What's his name in Chile did it, and they did it. They've done it in countless countries. It's just the problem always comes down to they don't get to the root of the problem, which is taking down all of these Marxist cabal people. You can't, because even if you free a country from their control temporarily, you don't win the hearts of the people, and then eventually you're going to go sliding back into degeneracy again, because they'll eventually take back control. That's why you have to go and take them down at the root. As I say, when you want to get rid of a weed, you go to the root. You don't just pull the top out. That's always been the problem. And so that's exactly what's been done now. And thank God for that.
Okay, well, that's something to look forward to. Well,
yes,
obviously you'll be about next week, Taylor. So if there's anything happening through the week, give me an email and we'll see what we can. Because if there's something new to come on, you can always come on and bring that up. All right, mate.
Yes, and also, if this happens, I'm not going to sit here and brag about it and say, "Oh, I was right. I'm not going to do that childish shit. I'm just going to be super happy because of the fact that we're all finally can see that we're free from the satanic, disgusting, debt-based system brought about by the Khazarian Empire from thousands of years ago." That's what it always comes down back to.
You do know that the man who stands up and frees you from all that and announces peace and safety, you know who he is, don't you?
What is he?
He's the Antichrist.
No, he's not the Antichrist. The Antichrist is somebody who promises you things and then doesn't deliver on them.
No, he's going to deliver, but he's going to turn. He's going to deliver peace and safety, but then he'll turn.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It makes promises, but then we end up back in the shitter again.
Oh, no, it's not. We're not going to be in the shitter with this one. It's going to be a lot worse than that. Anyway, thanks for coming on, Taylor. I'll see you next week.
All right. I hope I was able to clear some things up and answer some questions for people. One more thing before I go, though. I've been seeing a lot of people in the chat talking about how the legal name thing and, going off of the Atlantis name system or whatever it's called. I will say that I'm not really much into that, but I can definitely say that whole thing is going to be taken care of as well. So get your popcorn, get ready for the World War III scare event, and be ready, because we are going to be the digital warriors that has to help wake people up when we get normies coming to us asking questions, saying, "How did you know all this? Oh my God, what's going on?" That's going to be our job very soon. So be ready.
Okay, my friend. I'll speak to you next week. Take care, brother. God bless.
Yeah, take care, man. God bless.
Well, sir, we've done 2 hours. What's your summing up of this evening?
Well, we've talked about things that we have, I think, looked at comprehensively in the past. That was an interesting new take that I hadn't heard before from Taylor. I'm not saying it's not plausible, because it's plausible, but I still don't buy it. I'm going to need more. I'm going to need more evidence. So obviously that's the last thing that we looked at. Prior to that, we covered a lot of areas that we've covered before. It's very difficult to find something new. I mean, at the end of the day, I think somebody was just talking probably about half an hour ago in the chat about how we've got to set up more local initiatives, and I touched on it. I think that's what prompted it. With what the neighbour said to me, I think we're looking at rebuilding humanity, repairing human dignity, and I don't think you can do that with large scale. Politics, for example, will never be able to solve these problems at scale, because they're issues of human hearts, human minds, and initiatives as such, they don't change much. Most people need high impact experiences. So he says, I have the evidence. Please look at it. So if anyone wants to follow that audit trail that's been built up with Taylor's research, it's all accessible. There isn't time, I suppose, to follow up everything. And the good thing about it is everyone's got their pet projects and emphases. So the good thing about this is, although it's a diverse school of thought right across the board in the truth movement, we've got to give all voices some sort of scope to be heard, and we've got to give Taylor a credit for showing up, putting his head above the parapet, describing his theories, because lots of people don't do it. So are we any wiser? Probably not, but we've come together, and we've shared again on a Sunday evening, and I think the numbers have they touched 40 at any point?
Yeah, we've been in 40s.
So, we keep going, we keep plodding on, and we keep inviting people to come on. The chat's one thing, and we can try and answer questions as they come in the chat, but the conversation's sometimes all over the place. So yeah. I think, we'll benefit always by getting people on the video,
That's what it's about. It's about more views.
Yeah.
It's about different people's takes, because somebody can say something that'll spark something with you, and you'll say something that'll spark something with me. And before long, we've managed to be able to not maybe sort a solution out, but at least pull it in different directions to see, does it stretch that way? Will it stretch this way? Will it rise? Will it fall? These are the things that we need to start getting people together. I'm going to see if we can get some guests on who are doing the community stuff and see if it can strike a chord with people, because, it's all well and good that, people have looked to myself and looked to you and said, what should we do? Or why don't you do this? And, it's hard. It's hard. We've both been on the front line with this stuff, Alex. We both tried to do the things the best we could with the best information that we had, and we saw what it did. We needed that support then. So if people want to do that, then we can give them that support as well. It's about them getting on a platform. All I ever wanted was a platform to get me information out so that people could go, Webby, you're a knobhead because you're wrong because of this. And that never happened. So if had I not gone on to these radio shows, I'd not gone around the country, I wouldn't have been confident in what I was talking about. And because I was confident in what I was talking about, I understood what this world is. I'm a pattern recognizer and I could just see patterns everywhere. And I wasn't joining these dots on my own, Alex. These dots were being joined and it was right in front of my face. So, I get where Taylor's coming from with getting the information and getting a good feeling about it. Having said that, to think that, I mean, Trump should just walk this election, really, but it's plausible that it could all be a movie type scenario and all that stuff is going on, because if we are humble enough, we have to admit we haven't got a clue. We don't know what we're being told. We don't know whether it's true or not, because we've had so much rubbish fed. Oh, you remember what you started the show off with? Too much information. Well, if I give you a bit of truth and flood it with a load of other crap, you might just miss that truth or miss the subtlety of it. And we just know who is the prince of subtlety, don't we, in this world?
Yeah. So, well, we know how very difficult it is in a complex world that we're dealing with so many layers, so many jigsaw pieces to put together. The likelihood that anyone who's not in the corridors of power is going to be able to put the outline together, because we've got to look at the shadows and look at the claims and see things indirectly and look for inconsistencies. And I think Noam Chomsky talks about this when he talks about the propaganda model. We get things in outline like a silhouette. It's like having a silhouette, like a shadow when the sun casts a shadow of a shape, a human being. And you see the sun shining and you see the shape of the shadow. Now, you might be able to tell if it's got wider hips, shorter body, or side on, and you can see other features. You might be able to distinguish between a man and a female, male and female. You might be able to tell the relative heights. You might be able to glean quite a bit of information from those shadows. But you're not going to see any eye colour, hair colour. You're not going to see, any of the clothes and what they're wearing. So what you get when the light shines, but you don't have full disclosure, is at best a silhouette. Now, the most skilled amongst us can build a pretty good silhouette. And it's good to have that silhouette, but the silhouette isn't the substance. We're trying to map back from the outline shadow and fill in some of the features. But that filling in that we do, like a join the dots, is somewhat speculative. It's better than nothing, but I think the key is we've got to remain provisional in our understanding and realise that the capacity for error, when you're not directly plugged into, the information networks, is quite high. And this is why, again, I'll just say, journalism has got to be rescued. We've got to get honest journalism back if we want to solve that problem, because everybody needs sources. Because you can't be everywhere and you can't know every fact. And if we can't trust our sources, just like in the culture war, if we can't trust the people around us because the culture's been undermined, we're in that realm of uncertainty, and this is what's not doing very well for us. We've still got to speculate, but there are limits. And when we've got the information we've got to know where the line is. I know so much, and I can work with that provisionally, but I mustn't overstep. I mustn't make claims that go beyond what the shadow, or if I do, I must say, this is my speculation, I could be wrong. This is my speculation, I could be wrong. Here's a plausible possibility, but I could be wrong. But unfortunately, most people, when they conclude on some theories, suddenly in their own head, what they believe becomes fact. Then they tell it like it's fact. So somebody said earlier on in the chat, oh no, old sausage fingers is the Antichrist. So this idea that Prince Charles is the Antichrist, I've seen it doing the rounds. And realistically, I suppose there's a small percentage chance. But if you say that to most people who believe that Charles is the Antichrist, they'll just maintain the narrative. The sausage fingers is the Antichrist. And you go, well, yeah, he could be. But there's a
He
really
claims the right bloodline.
Say again.
He claims the right bloodline.
Yeah, but, you know, once we start doing that, the problem is, if people based on speculation start saying this is the case, then nobody, if people believe that, nobody would look elsewhere for the Antichrist. And then you'd end up looking at Charles, and then the Antichrist would show up and tap you on the shoulder and go, hey, it weren't sausage fingers, it's me. What are you going to do? So it doesn't make sense.
It's as likely
in one basket.
It's as likely to be William as it is Charles. If Charles abdicates, if Charles steps aside, who knows? Who knows? But again, it comes down to speculation. And there's an interesting guy, I can't remember his name, but he did make he did a presentation called "The Antichrist and a Cup of Tea," and
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah,
and that goes through all the heraldry on the shield on the coat of arms and stuff like that. It's very interesting information, but again, it is what it is. It's information. So have you got anything in final to wrap up with, Alex?
No, other than we'll be back next week, and there's a bit of homework that I'm going to set for everyone.
You're going to set it next week, or are you setting it now?
I'm setting it now.
All right.
Talk to your next door neighbour.
Is that your homework? Talk to your neighbour?
Yeah, just talk to your next door neighbour before next week. And come on and tell us about what happened. Let's start with something as basic as that. Talk with your neighbour, see what happens. They might have a surprise.
They might tell you where to go, but come and tell us. Let us know. We've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right, pal. I'll speak to you in a minute.
Job's a good one.
So we've come to the end of another Webster report. Again, on what would have been my mum's 94th birthday. And I know me and my mum would have had some quite heated debates, especially about paying bills and things like that, because she was old school and she thought she taught me how to survive in this world. And she did. She did teach me how to survive. But when the people who you're surviving against are getting worse and worse and harder, you've got to start looking at what the alternatives are. Well, I can't do this, what they're asking me to do, so what should I do? When you can't do it, you need to know what you should have been doing. What was the truth all along? If you just live in lies, then your house is built on sand. And that's what most of us, our foundations are. We've built it all on the sand, and when it collapses, we'll blame ourselves because we didn't do this or we didn't do that. But society has set us targets that we can't reach, and we shouldn't be trying to reach them. For people, Taylor said about if people can't see what's going on with the Americans' politics and all that stuff, with everything that's going on, if you can't see it, he doesn't know what to say. Well, I've been the same for about 15 years. If you can't see what's going on right outside your door now, where you were waving to your nan dying behind a patio door, and it was because of something that you've been told about, something that everybody now knows, there was a massive, let's just say, massive question mark about it. Let's just be diplomatic. But with all the plans about the immigrations, about the economy, about the judiciary, about the banking system, it's all stacked against you, and it's all your fault because you act that certain way. But you didn't know any better. So if you didn't know any better, you've got to then look inside yourself and be humble enough to go, wow, I might have to start again and start researching again. You know, at the end of the day, we are all in this together, not the politicians, but we are all in this together. We're the ones who are paying bills that we shouldn't, because it demises our economy. It's, you know, our economy's not thriving because the books aren't getting balanced, and it's because we're being taught to act a certain way. So we've got to start looking at it, and we've got to start having honest questions. And I think that was a great idea, that when you go out your house tomorrow, just say something. Just start the conversation up about something. See what your neighbours feel like. See what they're thinking. If it's about Coronation Street or football, you know, that's where you're at. But at least you know. You know, and I'll leave you with one quote that I've read earlier from the fellowship group, and it was that heavens has absolute border control, top-notch border control to get into heaven, but hell has no borders, and everybody can go there. Look at society, see if there's something you're missing. That's it. Just see if there's something you're missing. Thanks again. Thanks for all the great messages that we've had through the week. Thanks for your support. It was always we never knew whether we'd be able to keep coming here every week, because we didn't even know if people would listen. But again, thank you for all your support, and hopefully see you next week. Night, God bless, guys.
Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a gas-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a gas-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a gas-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a gas-based economy. Here's the Webster Report with Paul the Gasman Webster.